Welcome aboard, shipmates. This is Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories, a training program created for the United States Naval Sea Cadet Corps by our supporters and friends at the Navy Talent Acquisition Group in Philadelphia. I'm your host, Warrant Officer David Cheats of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps. I am joined by our all-Navy support crew of MC-1 Quinlan, who's our PAO, and filling in for the vacationing STG-1 Lewison is ABH-3 Morales as our technical support director. Today, cadets, this is the most requested topic that you've asked for. It's what it's like to be a naval aviator. And we have a fantastic speaker today. Lieutenant Matt Rogers of the Air Test and Evaluation Squadron, VX-1, is here to tell you his sea story and what it's like to go through trainings and fly on the E-2 Hawkeye. So cadets, make sure that you're interacting with this presentation. If you have questions and comments, put them in the comments section and I will read them out to Lieutenant Rogers as we move along. And also remember, there is an online quiz after this presentation. So take the quiz, get your 2 hours of virtual drill credit, and make sure you get some accomplishment out of this. So get the quiz done right away. And the link will be in the presentation after the live recording is done. Cadets, I want to caution you one more time. Make sure that you're filling out the correct email address as you're doing this, because if you don't fill out your email address correctly, you don't get your results, neither does your CO, and you've kind of wasted your time. So make sure you get that done. Slow down, fill it out right. So without any further delay, Lieutenant Rogers, this ship is all yours.
Thanks, Warrant. Hello, everybody. My name is Lieutenant Matt Rogers, call sign Sharvis. I am an E-2 Hawkeye pilot. Let me get the screen shared here and we can start the presentation. Okay, here we go. I am an E-2 Hawkeye pilot, and our mission is Airborne Command and Control, VAW. The pictures up there in the corners are a picture of the new E-2D over here with air refueling capability, and this one over here, this one is actually me from my first deployment. That is an E-2C Hawkeye. You can tell the difference with the little Dixie cup on top of the radar dome. Again, that's me down there at the bottom, Lieutenant Matt Rogers, call sign Sharvis. And let's talk a little bit about me before we get started. So in this presentation, I'll talk about me, I'll talk about flight school, I'll talk about the airplane, I'll talk about, a day aboard the ship as a naval aviator, and I can talk a little bit about daily life for most sailors as well. I'll talk about cool things the Navy's let me do and what I'm doing now. And then I've got a video from that we put together after my first deployment that should be pretty cool. Lots of cool footage from 8 months at sea there. So a little bit about me. That's me in the picture there. I'm on the left, and that's the plane that has my name painted on it, or it did when I was in that squadron. That's me with my buddy Dan. We went through flight school together, and we ended up in our first fleet squadron together. I'm from Manteca, California. It's the Central Valley in California, about an hour south of Sacramento. I've been in the Navy, technically been in the Navy for 12 years, but I've been commissioned for 8. So I did 4 years at the United States Naval Academy, where I studied systems engineering, and I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in systems engineering. And I got my commission in May of 2012. And then I've been in the fleet 8 years since then. And that's been flight school and multiple seagoing squadrons, and now I'm on a shore tour for now.
So Lieutenant Rogers, real quick, I hate to interrupt, but a lot of our cadets have aspirations of going to the Naval Academy.
Okay.
Right? Since clearly you went there, do you have any good advice in relationship to how to make yourself a more reasonable or outstanding candidate for that? Because it is extremely competitive.
Right. So the Naval Academy likes well-rounded people, good at school, play a sport, not required, but it's highly encouraged. And then some kind of extracurricular activity like Sea Cadets, for example, is a great example. Sea Cadets, Boy Scouts, volunteering, something like that shows you're well-rounded. And generally those kind of programs are also leadership training programs. So they like to see that. I think in high school, my GPA when I graduated was a 3.7, I think. It's been a while, so I have to remember, but
sure.
I had decent grades. No, I didn't get straight A's, but I got good grades. And then in order to apply to the academy, you have to apply. You need a nomination from a senator or congressman. There's a few other routes too, but those are the most popular. And each one of them will have a different application process. So it may vary. You have to check with your local one to see what the actual process for them is. And then once you have a nomination, you can apply to the academy, and that's just like a normal college application. But that's not the only path to being an aviator. So in order to be any officer, really, but in order to be an aviator, you have to be an officer. In order to be, or pilot or NFO, a naval flight officer. In order to be an officer, you have to have a college degree. So you either need to go to college on your own, go to college through NROTC, and the Navy pays for it, and you wear a uniform, and then when you graduate, you commission, or go to the Naval Academy, which is in itself a 4-year college, but you are active duty while you do it, and you wear a uniform and live on the yard and all that stuff. If you go to college normally by yourself, then you can apply to OCS, Officer Candidate School, and it's basically basic training for officers. And that is, I don't remember exactly how long that is, but that's in Newport, Rhode Island, and then you would report down to Pensacola.
Okay.
So, and I'll talk about the actual aviation pipeline on the next slide, but that is, I guess I'd say my advice for Naval Academy, or really commissioning in general: get good grades, go to college, and get some kind of degree. That's like the one prerequisite you need to be commissioned as an officer in the Navy.
All right. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Why I joined the Navy. It sounds like a cliche, but I actually met the Blue Angels at an air show in Stockton, California when I was 10. My mom took me to an air show. We saw them fly, and I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I really wanted to do that. And then we met them as they were walking around the air show. We actually met them, and I met Blue Angel number 1 at the time, and that sealed the deal. I wanted to be a Navy pilot. And pretty much from the time I was 10, that's all I wanted to do. So I told my mom, I want to be a pilot in the Navy. How do I do that? She just told me everything I just told you guys. She said, well, you got to be an officer. So how do I do that? We got to go to college. Okay. How do I do that? And you go to the academy. Okay, cool. So I made my goal, go to the Naval Academy. And I worked towards that all through, junior high and high school. And I ended up getting in, and I went there July 2nd, 2008.
So does your family have a Navy background or any sort of military background? Because that's really good advice. So your mom must be into something.
No, so both my grandfathers were in the military, and then my mom was enlisted in the Air Force before I was born, but no military officers. I'm the first officer in the family.
Okay.
Yeah. So the best thing about my job, and obviously I wanted to do this job for a long time, so I really like my job. But I get paid to land big airplanes on small floating runways in the middle of the ocean and travel the world. I like to say I get paid to land big airplanes on small ships, but then people say, but aircraft carriers are big ships. And I say, yes, aircraft carriers are big by ship standards, but they're really small by runway standards. So
right.
It's, as from a pilot standpoint, aircraft carrier looks pretty small from a couple thousand feet. And you'll see that in the video at the end. My top Navy memory is T-45 carrier qualifications day 2. And that doesn't mean a whole lot right now, but I'll tell that story on the next slide when I'm actually talking about flight school, because that was part of flight school. And then down there at the bottom is a list of my previous assignments. So starting from the bottom up, actually, that's United States Naval Academy, class of 2012. I graduated May 29th, 2012, in Annapolis, Maryland. And then everyone in aviation goes through NAS Pensacola, Florida, for aviation pre-flight indoctrination. And again, I'll talk about the specifics more on the next slide. But from there, I went to Corpus Christi for primary flight training, Meridian, Mississippi for intermediate jet training, and that's where I did my T-45 carrier qualification. And then I went back to Corpus Christi for multi-engine prop training. And then I got my wings out of there, and I went to Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia, to VAW 120, which is the training squadron that trains you how to fly E-2s, like specifically your fleet aircraft. And then after all that, I finally reported to my first actual real squadron, first seagoing squadron at Naval Base Ventura County, Point Mugu, California, which is about 10 minutes north of Malibu. It's awesome. And that was VAW 117, which is Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadron 117, or as they're known now, Airborne Command and Control Squadron 117. And then now I'm on my first shore tour. So I'm not deployable in this squadron. It's more like meant as kind of rest and relaxation while still working. And then I'll eventually from here, I'll rotate back to a C squadron. But I'm in VX1, which is a test squadron. I'm not a test pilot, but I'm a pilot in a test squadron. And that is, we're like quality assurance for the fleet. So we're like the last stop to make sure that new technologies and things that are going out to the fleet make sense and do what they're supposed to do. So before I move from this slide, though, you might be wondering what the letters and numbers for each squadron stands for. So the V signifies that it's a fixed wing squadron. Like a helicopter squadron would be 8 in H. So like a helicopter test squadron would be HX. The T down there in the VTs down, I don't know, I'm pointing at my screen, I'll use the mouse. The T's down here, they signify training. So VT means fixed wing training. And 28 is just the number of the squadron. And then VAW is, now they recently just changed it a few months ago, but it's Airborne Command and Control Squadron. X is Air Test and Evaluation Squadron. A few other ones, VFA is Fighter Squadrons. VAQ is EA-18 Growler Squadrons. VP would be Fixed Wing Maritime Patrol. That's like P3s and P8s. So it kind of tells you, you can tell exactly what the mission of a squadron does just by the name without needing to write out Airborne Command and Control Squadron, or Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadron. That's a really long name. So this just allows you to identify the squadron, and the number tells you exactly which squadron without actually needing to write everything out. And you can see here on the aircraft right here, that was one of our patches, which is a lemur and it says VAW 117 at the bottom. So,
is there any significance to the lemur?
There was, so our main patch, I don't have one laying around here, but the main patch is is an eagle on a blue background with a moon and some stars. And that squadron is the VAW 117, the Wallbangers is the mascot, which doesn't really have a great story behind it, unfortunately. But the lemur was like some squadrons would do like a throwback patch that wears because the E2 has been around for over 50 years. It's much more capable now than it was then, but the airframe has been around for a long time. So we like to do like heritage patches sometimes. So the lemur one was the patches back in the 70s or 80s, I think, for that squadron. So we would wear orange I'm wearing a black undershirt right now, but on lemur days, we would wear like neon orange undershirts and orange lemur patches on Wednesdays and Thursdays for fun, basically. Yeah. Okay, so now we talk about me. That's enough about me. But let's talk about the Naval Aviation pipeline. So let's say you went to college, you got a degree, or you went to the Naval Academy, you got a degree and a commission, you're out of OCS. This is my path through flight school, right? Flight school is kind of a choose your own adventure program, depending on which way you go. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And flight school has also changed a little bit since I went through. All the training is the same, but the order you do it is slightly different, at least for E2 pilots. But the first few steps apply to everybody. So aviation pre-flight indoctrination, that first bullet there, is a fancy way of saying ground school. That's in Pensacola, Florida, and everybody in naval aviation starts there. And Pensacola has the nickname the cradle of naval aviation, and literally everybody involved with naval aviation starts there. If you're an enlisted maintainer, you start at the schoolhouse in Pensacola. If you're a pilot, if you're a naval flight officer, if you're an enlisted aircrew, you start at the schoolhouse in Pensacola, Florida. And that takes about 3 months. And it's just ground school classes, no flying. And it's just learning about the basics of aerodynamics, weather, navigation, engines, things like the basic pilot stuff. Nothing specific to any aircraft, but like basic skills that you need. And really, it's kind of a test to make sure that you can keep up with the fast pace of flight school. So that's about 3 months long. It's really not that hard, but it feels hard at the time. because it's a lot of studying and it's a lot of tests and stuff. Every week you have a new test every week. And when I went through, 80% on this test was passing. So if you failed 2 tests, then that was it. Like, you go do something else in the Navy. So they kind of drill it into you early to make sure you study, because there's no room for error. And the reason they do that is aviation in general, and this applies to all aviation, but especially naval aviation with ships and things where it's a more dynamic space. Aviation is not that difficult, but it's extremely unforgiving. So if you make a bunch of little mistakes, it could eventually cause a catastrophic problem. So we try to eliminate, mistakes everywhere we can, and safety is a huge priority in naval aviation, but all aviation in general. But naval aviation spends a lot of time on safety, and little habits like that of making the passing score really high, it kind of leads into that. But so once you finish API, NFOs will stay, NFOs are like the backseat guys. Think like Goose in Top Gun. They will stay in Pensacola for all of their flight school, and they will stay there for 2 years, and they'll graduate with their wings out of Pensacola. Pilots travel a lot. We move around a lot in flight school. So for primary, for pilots, primary flight training is either in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is where I went, or Milton, Florida, which is about an hour north of Pensacola. And Corpus Christi is down way south Texas, like way far south, almost to Mexico. And it's really hot there, and it's really windy there. It's a great place for flight training. But what you learn there, though, is you fly a single-engine turboprop. And a turboprop is basically a jet engine with a prop on the front. So it's not a piston engine like a Cessna or something, but it's an actual jet engine that just drives a reduction gearbox that drives a propeller instead of just using the jet for thrust. And you can see here this top picture right here. These are T-34C, T-34Cs, Turbo Mentors. I actually took this picture back in my formation training in the T-34. That plane is like a World War II plane. It's not actually a World War II plane, but it has the sliding canopy, and it has a parachute that if you had to jump out, you'd have to stand on the seat and dive towards the wing and everything. No ejection seat or anything like that. It's all steam gauge. There's nothing advanced about that except for maybe the engine.
That sounds like a lot of fun to fly, though. Oh,
super fun. That thing's got about 550 horsepower, which is a lot for, think about there's students that are flying that have never flown anything else before, most likely, and they're flying something with 550 horsepower. And the curriculum in primary starts with basic flying, how to take off and land, how to do basic maneuvers and things. And then you'll move on to instrument flying, which would normally cost you a lot of money in the civilian world, and getting your instrument rating in the civilian world is a big deal. And the Navy makes sure that you're good at it, because a lot of your flying will be instrument flying in the fleet. So you learn how to just fly normally. Then you learn how to fly on instruments. And then eventually you'll do some formation flying, and you'll do some aerobatic flying. So like barrel rolls and, aileron rolls and half Cuban eights and all kinds of stuff like that. Which is super fun, obviously, as long as you don't get airsick. And a couple sprinkled in there, you'll get some solo flights. So after your phase of your basic flight training, they'll basically give you the keys and say, go fly around for an hour and then come back, and you fly by yourself. And then at the end of aerobatic training, they'll give you the keys again, and you get to go fly around and you're cleared to do aerobatics by yourself, which is pretty fun.
So I mean, that's a huge responsibility, but then again, you're responsible for yourself there, right? You're on your own.
Totally. It's the first solo is pretty nerve wracking. So, okay, so I have a great example of this actually. So my first solo, so backing up a little bit more, in every plane, you get a yellow book, called your pocket checklist that is full of all the emergency procedures. Some of those emergency procedures are required to be memorized. You have to have them down verbatim, because you don't have time to look them up if you're on fire, you don't have time to look up the procedure. You need to know what to do. And every plane has a different pocket checklist, or PCLs, we call it. And they all have different EPs, emergency procedures. So you have to learn them. So by the time you've gotten to your solo, you know what to do. Whether or not you've actually done it, and you do a bunch of simulators and stuff first too. So, and in the simulators, they do nothing but emergencies. So you're used to handling emergencies, but it's different when it actually happens to you. And on my first solo, I had an electrical failure that I lost half the equipment in the airplane. One of the electrical buses just shorted out, and I lost all kinds of equipment, including the air conditioner, and the flaps wouldn't come down all the way, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. And I got the plane safely on deck, and it was a very exciting day. It made for a fun sea story, but
Okay.
the train, that's what the training's for.
Right.
So, and that was on my first regular solo. So after that, the aerobatic solo, by the time you get to the aerobatic solo, you're a little more confident in the plane, but you're kind of at the point where just enough to be dangerous. So it's kind of surprising they even give you the keys like that. And I say give you the keys, there's no actual keys, but it's some levers and buttons to push. And then at the end of it, you'll generally finish with a formation solo, that's what this picture at the top is it's two students in those planes. I think if you look closely at that picture, there's nobody in the back seat. Those are two students flying solo. And actually, now that I think about it, I might be in this picture and not taking the picture. I can't remember, but it was a long time ago. But I'm somewhere involved in this picture, and the third plane would be an instructor that's flying along next to them to make sure that they don't hit each other and be safe. And then once you finish primary, you sit down, and based on your grades, because all your flights are graded in flight school, you put together a preference sheet of what you want to do. Like, I want to fly helicopters. I want to fly, big land-based maritime aircraft like a P-8. And then you put a preference sheet together, and then the Navy tells you, what you're going to do. And it's based on how well you did, your grades. The guy that got the best grades generally gets his first choice. And it also depends on what the Navy needs. If the Navy doesn't need any more jet pilots and you want to be a jet guy, unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you a jet spot. You may be stuck doing something else. But I haven't met a pilot that didn't end up liking their platform. So take that for what it's worth. And when I went through, you didn't pick jets or E2s and C2s. You picked tailhook, which was anything that goes to the boat. But anything that has a tailhook on it. And then you would go to, we can move on to the next bullet, actually, because that's the next step. I selected tailhook out of primary. And the jet training is in two locations. There's Meridian, Mississippi, or Kingsville, Texas. And Kingsville is about half hour, 45 minutes from Corpus Christi. And that's what the picture is there. This is the middle picture. It's a T-45 Goshawk. And you learn all kinds of, you go through the same basic stuff: basic flying, instrument flying, formation flying, aerobatic flying, aerobatic formation flying. That's pretty fun. Doing barrel rolls in formation is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's basically the same kind of training that you did in the T-34, or now they use the T-6, but in the T-34, but faster. The jet is just a faster, more powerful plane. So it's the same. You got to learn to think faster. And then halfway through that training, they would pick off people to go be E2 and C2 pilots. And that's what happened to me. I originally wanted to be a fighter pilot, but needs of the Navy, they needed more E2 pilots. So I got picked off and I got sent down a different path. And ultimately, I really like what I do. So I'm happy that it happened. But the jet guys from there would continue on and learn dogfighting and bombing and, low-level flying and jet stuff. And then the E2 guys, the multi-engine guys, would go back and learn multi-engine flying. But either way, when you're finished with jet training, that is when you do your first carrier qualification. And that's what that picture is, that second picture. I didn't take that picture. I found that on the internet, but I have a lot of pictures that look just like that. So for the fighter guys, that's usually the last thing they do. For us, we did that, and then we still had more training. So we didn't get our wings when we carrier qualified. We still had more training to do. The E2 training pipeline is the longest training pipeline in Navy flight school. And so the way that carrier qualifications work is you practice. I'm going to talk about more about landing on the boat later, but you practice a lot on land. They have the runway painted on the ground on the run, or the landing area on the ship painted on the ground at the field, and you practice like you're at the boat. And then you go out there, but when you go out there, you're by yourself. There's no instructor in the plane. So this student right here that's landing is by himself. And that's pretty crazy. And that leads into
very surprising that there's no instructor or anything there. It's
no. So there is an instructor. It's just not in the plane. So when you go out to the boat, you'll take 4 airplanes, and the instructor will be in the lead airplane, and then he'll have 3 students in formation with him. And when he gets to the boat, the instructor will circle overhead and keep an eye on the students, and they're landing on the boat by themselves, and they're doing all the carrier stuff by themselves. It's pretty cool. It's really fun. And that's actually my favorite moment in the Navy from the previous slide is actually from my carrier qualifications. I CQ'd on, I think I did it on Carl Vinson, USS Carl Vinson, in April of 2014. And that was, we flew out to San Diego. So we flew the jets from Meridian, Mississippi to San Diego. And we'd been practicing for the boat for weeks. So you have to do, hundreds of practice passes on land, and you have to do well at them before they even let you get anywhere near a carrier. Right. So we flew out there, did day 1 of carrier qualifications. So the T-45 CQ, what you need to pass is 10 day traps, 10 landings during the day. But they find that since it's so mentally taxing, it's very tiring, especially when you're new at it, that they only let you do 6 in a day, and then they'll stop you and you just hang out and relax, and then you just do the rest the next day. So it takes everybody 2 days, at least 2 days to qualify. So my favorite moment was day 2, because we stayed on the ship that night, and some people went home to land and they stayed in the hotel they were staying at on base, but I stayed on the ship. And so in the next morning, we walked up to the flight deck and we manned up the planes and everything. And I happened to be the first person who was up and ready to go. So they shot me off the cat first. And I remember, so I don't remember anything about day 1. It's so tiring, and you're working so hard to do well and not crash, that I don't remember. You're just on instinct. I don't remember anything about my day 1 of carrier qualifications, but I remember everything about day 2. Day 2, I was the first one off the ship at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, and it was a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. The water was perfectly flat, no waves in the ocean. It was you could not ask for a better day to fly around the boat. And for probably 2 or 3 of the 4 passes that I had to do, because it's not quick. You have to you trap, and then they have to taxi you back over to the catapult. They have to shoot you off again. You come around the pattern, trap, taxi you back over to the catapult, shoot you off again. It takes time in between. So for probably half an hour, I was the only student in the pattern, and it was pretty cool because I was looking out and I could see an entire aircraft carrier with thousands of people on it that at that moment literally only exist. The whole reason they were out there was to support me landing safely. It was pretty cool.
That was very cool.
Yeah, it was. And aircraft carriers cost something $500,000 a day to run or something insane like that. So it's pretty neat to be able to say that for at least for 30 minutes that was all focused on me completing training. It was kind of neat. But anyway, from there, once you complete carrier qualifications, if you were a jet pilot, you would likely get your wings and you would go learn how to fly the F-18. For E-2 pilots, you have to go learn how to fly a prop plane with 2 engines. So, and this is the part that they've changed in flight school. Now, out of primary, you just select E2s or C2s, and they send you to multi-engine training first, and then they send you to jet training, and then you get your wings at the boat. for when I went through, it was a little bit backwards. So we would do primary, and then we would do jets, and then we would do multi-engine training. We get our wings when we're done with multi-engine training. But multi-engine training back in Corpus Christi, and you fly that plane there at the bottom, which is just a King Air. It's literally just a King Air that has Navy painted on the side. And the engines are the same engines that the T-34 had, just two of them. Literally just two T-34 engines stuck on the side of the plane. So that plane has 1,100 horsepower, and you learn things about how to handle when one of your engines isn't working, that kind of thing. And then you don't do any aerobatics in that one, but you do formation there. It's mostly centered on instruments and emergencies. A lot of single engine training, and that's the primary focus. And that took about 4 months. I think I was there for about 4 months, and then I got my wings in. Actually, coming up on Friday, it will have been 6 years since I got my wings. I got my wings on August 14th, 2014. And then from there, I'm trying to think. Yeah, and that training is important because if you think about the way an airplane flies, if my hands are the engines and you lose one, but the center line of the plane is right here, this other engine that's still operating is pushing you. It's off the center axis, so it's pushing you around. And there's a lot of specialty training that goes into that. That's why that whole curriculum exists. And since my plane has two really, really big props and really strong engines, it's important training. But once they get...
So a question about like some new aircraft that are coming online, say like the V-22.
Sure.
So since the C-2 is, well, one of these days will be phased out.
Yeah.
One of these days. Where would V-22 training come in? Because it's kind of a helicopter. It's kind of a turboprop.
Right. So the V-22, they do... So the interesting about the V-22 is they actually can drive both props off of one engine, but they still go through all that training. They do similar to how E2 guys do. Since we need to know how to land on the boat and we need to do multi-engine training, we do both. They do helicopter training and multi-engine training, and then they also get their wings out of Corpus Christi. So they go to primary. They select tilt rotor. And when I was going through, it was just Marines that were doing that, but now Navy guys can do it too. They select tilt rotor. They go fly training helicopters in Milton, Florida, and then they will go to multi-engine, and they'll be in the same squadron as us, or they'll be in one of the others. There's only two multi-engine squadrons, and they'll be in one of the two, and then they'll graduate and they'll get their wings along with us. And then also like P3 or P8 guys, like big wing big multi-engine land-based planes, they go straight from primary to multi-engine training. So you could be in the same class as guys that are straight from primary doing that. So when I went through, there was like 4 or 5 of us who had just come from carrier qualifications. We were fully carrier qualified pilots who went back in, and we joined a class of guys who were going to go be P3 and P8 pilots, and we all went through together, and then we all got our wings together. So you kind of, like I said, it's like a choose your own adventure. Depending on what platform you're going to fly, you just kind of hop around until you get all the training you need in the order you need it, and then you get your wings, and then you go off to go do whatever you learned how to do. So after you get your wings, which is the big, that's the big achievement, then you now have to learn how to fly the actual airplane that you were training to fly. So all this time you've been flying orange and white training planes, and now you're going to go fly and learn how to use your actual real gray aircraft. And every community has one, sometimes 2 squadrons that's what they do, is they train people how to fly that aircraft. And ours is VAW 120 in Norfolk, Virginia. And they train the E2 and the C2 pilots. E2s and C2s train together because the airframes are very, very similar. The only difference is one's a cargo plane and one's a radar plane. But otherwise, they fly very similar. Okay, so now we're at the Fleet Replacement Squadron, the FRS, also known as the RAG. This is where you learn how to fly your plane. So in my case, it was the E2. The first time I went through as a student, I learned how to fly the E-2C Hawkeye 2000, a legacy aircraft. And then after my sea tour and my test squadron, we're not testing anything on the E-2C because it's going out. So we're testing E-2D. I had to go back to the AW120 for a short time and get a qualification in the E-2D. Basically, I have to learn the differences between the two. So on this slide, I'll talk. This is a picture of an E-2D advanced Hawkeye. It's a cutaway. You might be able to see some of the details. It's pretty. This picture's got a lot of detail in it. But the E-2 has a crew of 5, has 2 pilots up front and 3 naval flight officers in the back. So it's 5 officers is the crew of this plane. And the co-pilot and pilot co-pilot up front, and then the SECO, ACO, and RO. SECO is Combat Information Center Officer, ACO is Air Control Officer, and then RO is the Radar Officer. And that's the order of seniority as well. Generally, the SECO is the mission commander, and then generally the RO is the most junior person in the crew. But our mission is command and control. So we don't carry any weapons. We don't have any weapons. We've got a lot of radios and we've got a lot of sensors and really powerful radar. So our job is to look at big picture. We're big picture people. We look at the original intent of the E-2 way back in the 60s when it was, invented, first brought online, was to look for, bombers coming over the horizon. Basically, ships can only see to the horizon. The higher you put your sensor, the further you can see, which is why you always see navigation radars and weather radars and things at the top of the mast of a ship, because the higher they can get it away from the water, the farther its horizon is. Well, same applies with an airplane. If you can get an airplane 25,000 feet in the air, you can see way farther than a ship that's on the surface. So that's what the airborne early warning part of the mission was. And we still do that. It's just we do that while doing other stuff now. And we can do pretty much anything. We can coordinate search and rescue. We help the strike group see everything. We keep an eye on all of any surface and air contacts in the vicinity of the carrier. That way the admiral, the strike group admiral, at any given time can know what's going on around his strike group. Because in the middle of the ocean, you might be by yourself, but when you get into like the Persian Gulf or the Mediterranean or something, there's airplanes and ships everywhere. So you have to keep an eye on who's who and what's what to make sure that that's the case. And then when the fighters are actually fighting somebody, like if they're fighting another aircraft, there will be an E-2 controlling them, giving them tactical control, kind of talking them onto the bad guy, basically. And we can do the same for helicopters. We can do the same for, if we had to attack a ship or whatever. We're kind of a jack of all trades aircraft, and we can use our sensors for a lot of cool stuff. We can integrate with ships. We can integrate with aircraft. We can talk to all kinds of people. And we don't have any offensive weapons. We don't have any defensive weapons. The idea is we should see the threat before it's coming, and we should be able to get behind protection or send somebody to go prosecute it before it ever even becomes a problem. So.
And that's what I was going to ask you too, because that's a very important role, and you're a very strategic asset there. I mean, are you flying with protection all the time, or you really know what's going on? Because since you're not having an ability to defend yourself, you could be vulnerable. I mean,
around the carrier, it's never a problem. There's ships and we're flying. Anytime we're flying, most times, anytime we're flying, there are jets flying as well. And they're all keeping an eye on stuff. They all have sensors as well, but ours is just a big picture sensor. And there's people on the ships that are in charge of monitoring this kind of thing. So we relay information to them. They tell people what to do. Or in some cases, we are that authority and we tell people what to do. Go look at things and go check things out. Like if there's an unknown air contact flying towards the strike group, we need to know what it is. We will call a fighter and we will have them go look at it. They'll fly up. They'll take a look at it either visually or with a sensor, and they'll be able to see what it is and be like, oh, it's just an airliner, or it's a, whatever nationality airplane. And that happens all the time. So basically, it's just our job is to just know what's happening. On my first deployment, we spent 5 months flying in Iraq. So we would launch off the ship, we'd fly over Iraq during Operation Inherent Resolve against ISIS. And that's what the video you'll see later is about. But we would take off, we would fly for a couple hours in Iraq, and we would control the southern portion of Iraq. So if anybody was dropping bombs or anything, we were in charge of them doing that, which is airborne battlefield control. I can't remember the actual name of it. They keep changing the name of it, but it's basically command and control for the battle space. Okay. Our job is basically to know what's going on, which is why we get the nickname the eyes of the fleet, because we could see things really far away. But more about the aircraft specifically, you can see the tail hook. They kind of made one of the rudders here. They made it kind of see-through. You can see the tail hook. It's like a V shape with the hook on the end here. And the reason we have multiple rudders is because the engines are so big and strong. Each engine is 5,100 horsepower. So the plane has 10,200 horsepower. Is a lot. And the plane weighs, max takeoff weight for the E2C was 55,000 pounds. Max takeoff weight for the E2D is 57,000 pounds. And then we had to be below 46,500 or 48,500 to land back on the carrier, because that's the max landing weight for the carrier. So it's a big airplane. It's like 5 times the size or the weight of the T-44, which is the multi-engine trainer, but it's 10 times the power, which is pretty crazy. And generally we cruise around at 250 knots if we're just trying to get places. But when we're on station and when we're up on a mission, our whole idea is to be able to stay there as long as possible. So we'll put the flaps down and we'll go slow, and we'll try to save as much gas as possible so we can stay on station as long as possible. But,
do you ever loiter with one engine, or that's?
Oh no, definitely not. P3s will do that. Like planes with like 4 engines will definitely do that. But if we have an engine off, that's a bad day. We do not want that. Engines are life, so we'll shut them down occasionally for a maintenance flight, but that's purely just to make sure that it shuts down and starts back up correctly. We never shut them off for fuel savings. We would just come back and land. And now that the E2D, one of the things we're testing in my current squadron is aerial refueling, and I've got some pictures of that later of us. And the one on the first slide was us actually now we have the capability of getting more fuel airborne, which the fighters have had for a long time, but we just never had it because this plane is difficult to fly, and I'll talk about that on the landing on a boat section. But our wingspan is about 80 feet, which will come into play later. So we are the biggest. And the landing area on the ship's about 120 feet wide. So we've got about 20 feet left or right of the center line on the ship. It's pretty tight tolerances for landing a plane on a carrier. And then you might be wondering how you store this plane on the carrier. The wings fold right here. A little line that's going through. The wings fold back like a bird, like a duck or something. And you'll see that in the video as well. And the multiple rudders, ideally you'd have like a really big rudder, like a C-130 or something, but that doesn't fit on a ship. So we have to make multiple rudders. Let's see. What's next? Okay, day in the life. So I'm not going to talk about land-based stuff because it's more like a normal 9-to-5 job, except my job is to fly. But on the ship, it's different. So on the ship, most people work in 12-hour shifts. There'll be like the maintainers, a lot of ship's company and things, a lot of them will be day check, night check. And it's a 12-hour shift where you're just responsible for what you're doing. That doesn't work for aviators because sometimes we need to fly in the middle of the night. Sometimes we need to fly early in the morning. Sometimes we fly all day long. So you kind of are at the whim of the flight schedule, and the flight schedule will come out generally early evening, maybe late evening sometimes, the night before. And you look at it, and you'll see if you have any meetings, you'll see if you have any flights or anything on it. And typically on the boat, you'll typically have some flights. So you wake up, you do your ground job at some point. This is not necessarily, besides wake up, sleep, and repeat, the rest of this is not necessarily in order. But everybody all the officers in the squadron, in addition to flying the plane, will have a ground job to help run the squadron, because there's a limited number of limited space on the ship. So we all have to do multiple jobs. So my job is to be a pilot, but I also do other things when I'm not flying. And that holds true in my current squadron as well, like the ground or shore squadrons. So my current job is I'm a division officer, and I have 2 work centers full of sailors. So I've got 20-ish people that report directly to me, and there's sailors in different shops and stuff. And same thing would happen on the boat. And then for mission planning, depending on what the mission of the flight is, the crew would go around and prepare for it, basically walking around to the different spots. For us, it generally involves walking around to different offices on the ship and getting the information that each of these people have, so we can piece the whole picture together when we go flying. And then we'll do a flight brief. No matter what we're doing, we always brief the flight. We cover what we're doing, where we're doing it, when we're doing it, and we cover any contingencies and emergencies, and we brief everybody on what we're going to do. That way, if anything were to happen, we're all prepared for it. And we'll go flying. Typically the ship works in cycles. So the ship will launch airplanes and then recover airplanes, and there'll be a half an hour downtime. Then they'll launch airplanes and they'll recover airplanes, and repeat throughout the day. So we do it. We refer to flights as single cycles, double cycles, triple cycles. So it's an 1.5 hour cycle. So a single cycle would be an 1.5 hour flight. Double cycle would be 3 hours. Triple cycle would be 4.5 hours. And that's about the max we could do in the E2 is a triple cycle. Until air refueling makes it to the fleet. So, and then after every flight, we'll debrief the flight. And this ties into the safety culture that I was talking about. We talk about, they all start with safeties of flight. We talk about anything that happened that was unsafe. We talk about it. No one gets in trouble for this stuff. We try to learn from the mistakes, and then we tell the rest of the squadron, so the lessons learned, that way we can improve for next time. That way we're always improving. And what you really don't want is somebody to make the same mistake that you did, and you could have prevented it by informing them. So, and then at some point during the day, eat, sleep, and relax, and do your ground job. So there's gyms all over the ship. Gyms tend to be crammed into wherever fitness equipment fits. So this is a picture, the bottom picture here is, we would call this the seaside gym. This is specifically in one spot. And it's a boat launch spot where they'll launch it. You can see in the background here, these cables right here are actually on the other side of this railing, are actually holding up a rigid hull inflatable boat, like a rib. And they'll launch stuff from out there, but there's empty space there, so they'll use it for cardio equipment. On USS John C. Stennis, my last deployment, we had, actually, this might even be the Stennis. We had rowers like this, and then we had a bike, and then there was ellipticals behind it, and some more stationary bikes behind that, and it was a cardio gym. And then sometimes there'll be weights or equipment in the hangar bay. There'll be 1 or 2 gyms scattered around the ship. So, you might have to go walking a little bit to go find a gym, but they're kind of everywhere, wherever they fit. And that's a good way to help pass the time while you're at sea too. And then I don't have eat on this list, but the food is generally kind of cafeteria style. It varies ship by ship. But there'll be certain times when you can go get food, and then you eat, and then you go back to doing whatever you're doing, and then relax. So I put relax on this because this top picture here is what we call a ready room, and that every squadron will have one, and they generally try to make it cool, make it custom. So in ours, I don't know if you can see it, but we have this big light up old school Art Deco style sign that said our squadron, the world famous wall bangers, VAW 117. It had a bunch of light bulbs in it and stuff. And then behind that, we put fake brick. So it looked like you were in a basement bar type thing. It was pretty cool. and it just makes it look better than the bare metal of a ship. And every squadron will customize it to how they see fit. Like, for example, we had pictures of our family and stuff hanging from the ceiling, and there's football, so that tells me this picture was probably taken around the Super Bowl, 2016.
Right.
So, yeah. Excuse me. Somewhere in this picture, while we have the ready room pulled up, I don't see it, but there will be a bolt, like a big aircraft bolt hanging from the ceiling. And that gets hung over it's kind of like the cone of shame sort of thing, where it'll get hung over the ready room chair, because each chair is a specific person. You can see somebody's name tag on the back of these ones. It'll get hung over the ready room chair if they're the last person to bolter, which is when you miss the wires on the ship and you don't land and you have to go around and try again. You generally get made fun
a little public shaming, but mostly but good natured. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's totally good natured. And then I'm going to talk about it here in a second, but this board here on the left, it has poker chips on it, and that's called the Greenie board, and that's a way that we track your pilot's landing performance. And I'll talk about that on I think it's the next slide. But as far as relaxing goes, the ready room is kind of like the squadron's living room. It's where we brief for flights. It's where we hang out. It's where meetings are held, that kind of thing. It's just a general purpose room that's ours. And in the evening, we'll generally play movies on the projector, and make pop. We'll have almost every squadron. We'll have a popcorn maker and a coffee maker, and basically just hang out and have fun when nobody's working.
Okay. So just trying to get a sense of timing here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We have 15 minutes left.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's. I think I only have 2 or 3 more slides, and then the video.
So, cadets, make sure you're getting your questions in, because we want to make sure we have time to answer all those.
Yeah. Okay. Quickly, how to land on a boat. So, this is an older picture. This bottom picture, because you can tell by the planes, we don't have these anymore. But this was the clearest picture that I could find of what it looks like to land on a ship. Okay, so you have the wires going across here, and you have the marker for the landing area, the ladder lines, and the center line here, and then you have the lens, and we call it the ball. That's what I have over here, the ball. The ball is the orange light in the middle, and then the datums are the row of green lights. The green lights tell you they're a reference for you of the glide slope that you should be on. The ball, the orange light, moves up and down based on, it doesn't actually move, but it appears that it's moving to you based on how high or low you are. So this guy, whoever this pilot is, and this was probably taken from an E2 because it looks like he's in the right seat. Excuse me. He's on glide slope. That's good. You want that. And he's also on center line. You can tell because he's going right down the center line. The thing we can't tell from this picture is if he is on speed, which is the third component of landing on the boat. That's angle of attack. So angle of attack is the angle that the airplane makes with the wind, right? And that's it. Normally, a normal plane will come in and land and flare, and they would, like think of an airliner, or literally anybody except the Navy would come in and flare, and they would kind of coast to a stop on their back wheels, and then they'd slow down and all gracefully, right? But you can't do that with the resting gear. We need to get the tail hook needs to touch down right there every time. So the way we do that, and the information you're going to see from this is only accurate if your airplane is at the same angle of attack every time. So the way the Navy trains to fly is, instead of controlling your glide slope with the nose, you control it with speed. You hold the nose at its constant angle, and you control the power. And less power, you come down. More power, you go up. And that's how you control your glide slope. And the idea is to get the hook right there, right between the 2-wire and the 3-wire of 4 wires. And that's what would happen if you saw this, where the ball is centered. FCLPs is field carrier landing practice, and that's what this picture is. You can see, this is in Point Mugu. You can see there's the landing area of a ship painted on a runway in Point Mugu, and we use that to practice. And there's a lens like this too. There's a lens off camera here. And that's what we use to practice. And it's the closest you can get to actually being on a ship without actually being in a ship. And it allows you to like warm up and get good at it again before you go back out to the boat.
Your tail hook at that point in time, or is it just visual?
No, you keep the hook up for those because there's no wires, but you also don't need the hook down, and that doesn't change anything about how you fly.
Right.
But yeah,
how you stop. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. And then I already talked about the ball. So meatball lineup AOA is like a thing we say to ourselves. Meatball is the nickname for the ball. Ball is short for meatball because it kind of looks like a little meatball. It's a little orange dot. But the way you land on the boat is you got to look at those three things as fast as you can for the 15 to 18 seconds it takes to land on the ship. So you're looking meatball lineup AOA, meatball lineup AOA, meatball lineup AOA, meatball lineup AOA, to boom trap. So you're basically, it's kind of like juggling. You have three variables that you need to keep constant, and it's like spinning plates or something. Like that's your job. You get really good at multitasking. It's only for 15 to 18 seconds. That's how long the straightaway is in the landing pattern. And then night traps are the same thing, but way darker. And I have some video. I think I couldn't find a good picture of it because it's so dark. It's hard to get a good picture of it. But the video should have some footage of it. But it's pretty scary. I like to say that night traps are how we earn our day traps, because day traps are really fun. It's super fun. The most fun thing you can do in an airplane is landing on a boat in the daytime. Nighttime is a different story, and it's really not fun, especially if the weather is bad or it's overcast and there's no moon, because there's no lights out there it's just darkness. It's just if there's no moon and it's overcast, you can't tell where the water stops and the sky starts. So the ship will just be like a square of lights floating out there in the water, and that's all you see. You have no reference to the horizon. You got to fly your instruments, and then you got to fly the ball until you touch down, and hopefully you trap the first time. One important part of this, though, before we move on to the next slide, is these guys right here, guys in white. Those are landing signaling officers, nicknamed paddles, and it'll be one of every guy one pilot from every squadron on the ship, and that's like a duty they stand, and their job is to stand on the back of the ship and help us land. They are talking to us. They will tell us if we are low, they'll tell us power. If we are high, they'll tell us easy with it. If we're too far to the right, they'll tell us come left. If we're too far to the left, they'll tell us right for lineup. If our nose is the wrong attitude, they'll say attitude. And if we get way too low, they'll say, wave off, which is generally not good. That means you're really low. But they own the landing on the ship. Their whole job is to get you aboard safely, and they're a huge part of landing on the boat. I am not an LSO. I'm not a paddles. Not everybody can be one, and timing didn't work out to where they needed one when I was there. So, but it's they take it very seriously, and it would be impossible to land aboard a ship without paddles on the platform. So, but it's super fun, and there's some cool video of it coming up.
Oh, cool.
Okay, cool places I've been in the Navy. I did one full deployment from November of 2015 to July of 2016, and then I deployed again I didn't do a whole deployment, but I deployed with another squadron. That first one was on USS Harry S. Truman. Second one was on Carl Vinson for 2 or 3 months in 2017. And then the third one, I actually left the squadron halfway through, but I did half the deployment, and that was on USS John C. Stennis from October of 2018 until February of 2019. And these are the places I've got to go in port. So I got to go to Croatia, which was really cool. Went to Dubai many times. Went to Dubai 4 times on the first deployment, and then once again on that third deployment. And that top picture is actually me playing golf in Dubai. It looks like the Wizard of Oz. It's cool. I've been to Bahrain. I've been to Greece. This picture on the right here, or in the middle there, is Greece on Crete. I've been to Guam, which is an American territory, but we still pull in there And then I've been to South Korea, and I've been to Singapore, which is that picture there on the bottom is a famous hotel called the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore.
That's that sky bridge between those buildings, right?
Yeah, and there's a pool up there, actually. That whole thing is like a giant bar and lounge with a infinity pool that looks out over the whole city. It's pretty cool. But yeah, and when you pull into port, you generally pull into port for like 3 to 4 days. And you'll have watches or you'll have some duties you have to do here and there. But for the most part, you get off the ship and you go get a drink or, explore the local, sites to see and do some cool touristy stuff. Or just go hang out on the beach. It's basically time to relax and see the world, and it's pretty cool. My last deployment, unfortunately, I left halfway through, but we went to Singapore right after Thanksgiving. We were in Dubai on Christmas Eve and Christmas, and then I left before they went to the next port. But they went to Thailand. They went to, I think they went to Bahrain. They ended up going to France, which is pretty cool. A lot of cool places that you can go, and you get paid to go there, which is kind of nice.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then I think, okay, this is the last slide before the video. This is what I'm doing now. That picture at the top is aerial in-flight refueling. I actually took that picture. That's what it looks like from the pilot's point of view. I wasn't flying. The co-pilot was flying at that time, but so I wasn't taking pictures while I was flying.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah. So that's what it looks like to get gas in an E2 from a tanker. That is an Omega tanker, which is a civilian tanker that the military contracts with. But it's basically just an airliner that's a flying gas station. And this is how the Navy gets gas with this drogue and boom, or drogue and chute, or probe and drogue. That's what it's called. The probe and the drogue, because this is a whole lot smaller than the way the Air Force gets gas with a big boom that comes out of the back of the plane, because we have to be able to do it on a ship. And on the ship, the F-18s will be a tanker. And we now have the capability to get gas from them. And the first fleet squadron, VAW 126, now has the first aerial refueling capable E2 in the fleet. And I know that because I gave it to them 2 weeks ago. So
right.
I delivered it to them. So the capability is officially in the fleet. And over the next few years, the rest of the fleet will be upgraded to match that. So that's what we do. In VX1, my current command, we test new features as they're going to the fleet. We basically, the engineers and the developmental test squadrons will make a part, and they will give it to us, and then we make sure it works, and we write a report on it, basically. And then it goes out to the fleet, and the fleet knows what to expect when they get it. And the other thing I do, which we are always doing as officers, is leading sailors. I already talked about like my shops now. I've got like 20-ish people that work for me, and I work for them basically. And my job is to make sure that they have what they need to do their jobs. And in my previous squadron, this is a close runner-up for my favorite Navy memory. This is one of my sailors, and I got to re-enlist him in the air in my last squadron. He asked if he could do it. Skipper gave the thumbs up, and we went flying. And I got to do his re-enlistment while we were flying over Southern California. And I let him fly. That's why he's flying here. And that flight actually, coincidentally, was my 1,000th hour in the E2 on his re-enlistment flight. So that was pretty special. It was cool.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah. We don't get to fly guests very often, but when we do, I really enjoy it. It's fun. And that's what I'm doing now. Let's see. Okay. Here's the video from my first deployment, 2015, 2016. I'm going to click this. It's going to take me to YouTube. It's about 6 minutes long, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Terrorists in Syria and Iraq. But most importantly, I was fortunate to get a first-hand look at the men and women who sacrifice everything.
So that was an idea of, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That was an idea of like the workspaces on the ship. And there's a picture of the wings folded, what is what flight deck life looks like. you'll see some glimpses. Here's some maintenance. They're replacing the nose wheel tire. Let's see. Here's a catapult shot off Cat 2. There's me. I'm in there.
There you are.
We took a picture for Mother's Day. You can see the tight quarters on the flight deck, and it's there's a lot of people and a lot of moving parts because you're not the only person manning up your plane. All the jets are manning. You might be launching on an event with 17 fighters, and they all have a little group of people that are helping them launch, and you have a group of people helping you launch. So it's a pretty chaotic workplace.
So those are the flight directors you're talking about.
Yeah.
Paddles, yeah.
Yeah, that was video from Paddle. Okay, that's not even a night pass. That's an evening pass. We call that a pinky pass, where it's still a little bit light outside, but it counts as a night pass. Your pictures from Croatia. That's probably my favorite port call I've ever done.
Motivating and
that's the Admiral. He was Admiral Batchelder.
The mission that we're on is very righteous.
What does ultimately success or victory look like?
Yeah, I think it looks like violent extremism being eradicated.
That was a maintenance flight. We don't normally shut down engines, but that's me. I'm in that plane.
Nice.
That's my buddy Tim trying to land on the boat.
Do the NFOs face forward or rear for takeoff? They face rear, right?
They face forward. In the C2, all the seats face backwards. But that's our CMC. he got to fly with us one time out there. They face forward for launch and recovery, and then they turn sideways for the mission.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We were able to get some footage from some of the fighter guys too. There's a couple of bombs being dropped later, I think.
After the recent bloodshed in Brussels.
That is exactly why we're out here. If anything, it gives us that much more purpose and resolve to ensure that we're doing things the right way and that we leave this region better than we found it.
And again, we don't have any weapons, but those were some of the bombs that were dropped by the fighters in our air wing when we were in Iraq. I think Greece is probably a runner-up for favorite port call. That was a lot of fun too.
Grease there.
That's a night trap. Yeah. It's pretty dark.
Very nice.
Rewarding experience or assignment than the one that just took me thousands of miles away to a place where the fight against ISIS begins.
That's great.
Now, let me make sure that turned off. There we go. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that video. That puts it all together.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty cool. Real cool, actually. So I do have a couple questions that came in from the cadets. They were in lockstep with what you were talking about. So some of the questions, cadets, that you asked were actually covered through the presentation. So just for sake of time, rewatch the presentation. You'll get a bunch of that stuff out of here. But somebody asked this. Actually, I know who asked it, and I don't know if you want to disclose this or not. But how'd you get your call sign?
I knew that question was coming.
Well, you let it out there, so you knew.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so little background of Navy call signs. Navy call signs are, we don't get cool call signs. Navy and Marine Corps don't get cool call signs. We get mean call signs. The Air Force has their cool call signs. The Navy and the Marine Corps, you don't get to pick your call sign. It's not like you come in and be like, I want to be so-and-so, or you can call me so-and-so. Typically, it is either funny thing you did, if you did something dumb and everybody can make fun of you for it, or if you have a name that something plays well with, that'll be a joke, or something physically, like if you look like someone famous, that would be one. But typically or your personality. It would make fun of your personality if you have a quirk or something. Mine, unfortunately, is not a great story. It's my call sign is Sharvis, which is kind of a play off of Jarvis, like the AI from Iron Man, because I know a lot of factoids and little trivia, but not a lot of it's useful. So it's kind of like sort of helpful Jarvis. So it's not a great story, but that's the origin of mine. But typically, it's you do something dumb, and then somebody sees it, and they make fun of you for it, and then that becomes your nickname. And if it sticks, it sticks. And like, I know people that I didn't even know their real name for. Like, if somebody calls them by their real name, I have to think like, who is that again? Because I know them by their call sign.
I didn't know your name was Howard. That's weird.
That happens all the time. Yeah, be like, who's Nick? Like, yeah.
Another question is, was there anything you would have in your flying experience, something that you've done, like a mistake that you would have changed or done differently now?
Like specifically, or
it's a general question. Yeah.
Okay, so things I would have done differently. I don't think, like, generally, probably not. My first choice in flight school was jets. It always has been. It always was jets. Like, I, really, really wanted to be a fighter pilot. And right. it didn't end up working out for me just due to timing and what the Navy needed. And I'm very happy with how it turned out, because I really like the lifestyle and the duty stations of E2s. And the jet guys tend to work really hard. Like, they work really hard. They have a lot of studying they have to do, and they have a lot of like, their airplane is really easy to fly. It basically flies itself, but what they do with it is very difficult. And they spend a lot of time studying and trying to earn qualifications and stuff. Whereas, like, my job is kind of the opposite. Primarily, like, my job is to fly the airplane safely, because the E2 is, I didn't really talk about this very much in the presentation, but the E2 is a very difficult, it's a very bad airplane. Like, as far as, like, comparing it to, like, just a normal airplane, it's really difficult to fly. It requires a lot of skill to physically maneuver the airplane. I can talk about that a little bit, but would I change anything? Probably not, because I like the community that I'm in, because I'm never in the plane by myself. I always have at least another pilot and one NFO but more often than not, I don't go anywhere without 4 friends with me, you know.
Right.
And I really like that, and I don't think I would change anything about that. But
Okay,
yeah,
and it's great being with the crew, right? Because
yeah, I really like the crew concept.
So another question is there anything that you particularly dislike about the Navy?
Like dislike about that? There's plenty of it. Everybody dislikes something about the Navy, but I like being at sea. I like the seagoing stuff because I like flying around the boat. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any downsides. Being away from family is a big one. 8 months away from family. Being, on the boat where you're limited to, you're living in a room with several other people. If you're an enlisted guy, you're living in a room with a lot of other people. There's definite downsides to it. Not having reliable communication. Like there's no cell signal or internet out there. I mean, you have internet on the boat, but it's like satellite internet. And it's the bandwidth for what you can do like on your personal time is limited. It's very limited. So you can get mobile. It's very, very slow internet, and it's very hard to talk to family at home. So that puts a lot of stress. That part kind of sucks. You come in, I go to a lot of cool places, but that means I'm gone a lot, so there's a trade-off there when it comes to family life. Can't argue about the pay. Pay's pretty good. I'm trying to think of things that I dislike. It can be stressful depending on the situation. And I tend to find that those kinds of situations, when they're over and they're done, you're just like, okay, cool, whatever, on to the next thing. But I know I have friends, I have pilot friends that are planning on getting out. So the minimum service requirement, so that's an important thing to talk about. I should have talked about this in the flight school, is you have to pay for your flight school training, but you don't pay with money, you pay with years in service. So for pilots, it's 8 years of service after you get your wings. So it took 2 years to get my wings, and then 8 years. I owe the Navy 8 years of service as a pilot until I'm even eligible to get out of the Navy. I am not going to get out. I'm going to stay in because I like what I do and I like the job. But I have a lot of friends who are going to go fly for the airlines just because it's a less stressful on the family or personally, or that's just what they wanted to do all along, and they use the Navy for flight school. That's. Some people do that. But if you are willing to pay the 8 years required to pay it off, good on you. But
well, I have a lot of friends who were aviators and then are flying in the civilian world, and it's not what it's cracked up to be, especially now, right?
Right.
Everybody
It's definitely different. I think I have a friend of mine who is out and he's flying for the airlines, and he said it was weird not having a mission. There's always an objective to military flying, and that's not the case on the outside. The case is to get people from point A to point B, which is, not the same as, an actual tactical objective or something, and the teamwork required to achieve that. So there's upsides and downsides to every job, and especially in the military. But I personally think the upsides far outweigh the downsides for me.
So then another question is, if you weren't a pilot in the Navy, what else would you do?
What would I do? That's a hard question because that's all I've ever wanted to do, and I'm doing it. So I never even considered the option, which a good strategy, by the way, if you have a goal for something like that, is if I want to be a pilot, okay, how do I do that? I got to do this. How do I do that? I got to do this. How do I do that? And then you just work backwards until you get a small enough goal that's achievable, and then you just move on to the next one. That's what I did, and it worked out for me. But what would I do otherwise? Probably, besides, I'm assuming NFO is out of the question because that's it's still aviation. I don't know.
There's not really a wrong answer here, right?
Yeah. Submarines, maybe? I don't know. I always thought those were cool, but I never really considered it because I've always been focused on one thing, and I ended up doing it. So,
okay,
yeah.
Fair enough. All right, so I'm going to close this out with the one question that the cadets always ask. Right, this is a tough one, right? But put some thought into it. So, if you were to describe the Navy in one word, what would that word be and why?
In one word. Okay.
I know it's harder than you think, right? But you only have one word. Of all the words you've ever had, you have one.
I would say teamwork, because it sounds cheesy, but like my job is literally not possible without a small army of people to do their jobs. For example, so even just flying the plane, we have 2 pilots working together for everything. There's 3 NFOs in the back that are working together for everything. It's difficult to land on the boat. I could probably do it by myself. I've done it once or twice with like a guest in the right seat, but like at night, you absolutely need 2 pilots, and that is teamwork is required to get aboard the boat. And then even if you were by yourself, it's teamwork between you and paddles. And paddles is a team by themselves. They're working in a group of like 8 people. They all work together to make sure that the aircraft can get, that the deck is safe and that everything is ready to go for the plane. There's multiple people watching the plane, and then even on the flight deck, the whole flight deck is one giant team evolution. There's all the color-coded jerseys and stuff. Nobody could do that one job by themselves. And I think that applies to everything in the Navy. The people driving the ship and on the bridge, it's all teamwork. One guy doesn't drive the ship. Someone does the helm. Someone does the lee helm. Someone is the navigator. Someone's a lookout. Someone's officer of the deck. It doesn't work by yourself. The Navy is bigger than any one person, and it has to be. Otherwise, it can't be all automated, and it can't be by itself. So
okay. So we've pretty much proven that whole single pilot Maverick Top Gun thing, solo agent by themselves, is completely fictitious.
Oh yeah, even the jet guys, even a single seat jet pilot.
Yeah.
He never goes anywhere by himself. There's always another plane. He's got a wingman.
Right.
Like they never go anywhere by themselves. That makes for a good movie, but it's not necessarily, that part's not necessarily true.
Right, exactly. Because there's always an E2 out there somewhere.
Yeah, and several jets. So.
Well, Lieutenant Rogers, I really want to thank you on behalf of the Naval Sea Cadet Corps, the time you spent with us today, and sharing your story and all the great imagery and the video and everything, explaining what it takes to get through the pilot pipeline and what it's like to actually fulfill this rollout in the fleet. Very impressive. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know the cadets enjoyed it. And cadets, if show your appreciation here, just smash and destroy that like button when we have everything up there. So, Lieutenant Rogers knows, and the crew at NTAG Philly knows that you appreciate what we brought for you today. So again, Lieutenant Rogers, thank you. And thank you to you, everybody at VX1 for, giving you some free time to talk to us today.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. And cadets, again, don't forget, as soon as it's posted, get out there, do that online quiz, get your 2 hours of virtual drill credit, and make sure you're using the right email addresses, okay? So on behalf of myself, Petty Officer Quinlan, Petty Officer Morales, and the vacationing STG-1 Lewison, thank you very much for watching our episode today, and see you next time on Real Sailors, Real Sea Stories. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks for having me.